Hi guys, it's Debbie from Debbie J's Crafting Corner, and I've got another DiesRUs design team project for you today. I am in a Christmas in July mood, so I'm going to be using the How You Bean Christmas Cookie add-on from Lawn Fawn and the How You Bean stamp and die set. So to start off with, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out some of these cute little cookies. Now what's fun with this set is that we have the cookie shape stamps and we have stamps for the coloring of the icing. Now I'm going to stamp the icing color first because it's easier for me to layer. I'm also positioning my stamps higher up on my card panel so that all I have to do is move the panel up to stamp the next group of cookies. For my stamping, I'm sticking with some traditional Christmas colors and using some Catherine Pooler's ink. I have some Cranberry Fizz, Deck the Halls, Grass Green, and Rockin' Red. So I've got two different shades of red and two different shades of green. I'll start off with the lighter red, Rockin' Red. Now I'll move the panel up so that I can stamp the next group of cookies. This time I'll stamp them in Cranberry Fizz. After cleaning off the stamp and moving it up again, I'll go ahead and stamp down with that lighter green, Grass Green. I'll move it up one more time and then stamp with Deck the Halls. I want to get the cookie shapes positioned right around each of the icing layers. So I'm lining up the stamps on my platform and then stamping them onto some acetate so I can see where they will stamp on my cardstock. I'm using some brown inks from Hero Arts for the cookies. I'm primarily using caramel, although I do pick up one of the others by mistake a few times. Next, I'm going to stamp out my main panel. I've already got a general idea of the layout. I'm first stamping the pile of cookies using Cup of Joe ink, which I grabbed by mistake. I thought it was the caramel. Next, I'll stamp out my cookie jar. I want it to look like the cookie jar was knocked over and it's spilling a bunch of those cookies out. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this down in some black ink. I figure that the black ink will look like the edges of the jar and the brown will look like the edges of the cookies. Now I'll stamp some more of the cookies inside the jar. To color these cookies, I'm still using the icing stamps, but I need to do some masking first. I stamped the cookie shapes onto some Post-it tape and fussy cut them out to use as masks. So I'm putting all of those masks down, and next I'm going to go ahead and stamp some of the images that now are available for me to stamp and not get ink where it's not supposed to be because they're masked off. You guys know what I'm talking about. Because the Catherine Pooler inks are water reactive, I'm able to go back in after the fact and touch up any places that I may have messed up with the inking. I'm also trying out something I haven't tried before. With the Hero Arts ink, I don't know whether or not you're supposed to use them with water or not, but I'm going to try using that caramel color and a water brush and color in the different parts of the cookie that is not covered with icing. That worked perfect. So I'm going to go back and do the same thing on those first cookies that I had stamped out. Then I'll fussy cut each of those out. So before fussy cutting out all of these little images, I'm putting some scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive on the back. I'm actually using up some scraps that have been in my little scrap area for this double-sided adhesive for a long time. I don't use it often, and every time I use a sheet, I wind up with a little scrap. This time I'm going to be using nothing but scraps and then cutting all of these little things out. The How You Bean die set has a jar-shaped die and a die that cuts out that jar shape and a window. I just love this. To make the shaker well, I'm cutting a couple of layers of the shape and window out of some DiesRUs foam and that jar shape out of some transparency or acetate. I also used some double-sided adhesive on the back of those two foam panels so that it would be easier for me to get them to stick together, and they'll stick together really, really well. I'm going to take the release paper off of one side of my shaker pouch and put a piece of acetate that I've already die cut out in the shape of that little glass jar. Place that down. And here I remember that I forgot one piece of the jar. The one that goes on top of the shaker. We don't want to see the foam. So I'm cutting out the shape and window piece out of a scrap of white cardstock. Then I'm using the negative space as a template to get perfect positioning of the stamped jar. I should have added some double-sided adhesive to the back of this piece before I cut it out, but I didn't, so I'm adding it to the acetate on my shaker with some art glitter glue instead. It'll just take a little while to dry. While that's drying, we'll finish up the main panel. We can't just leave the jar and cookies floating in the air. So I'm using some Post-it tape and masking a horizon line. This will create a wall section and a countertop section for the panel. I'm doing some easy inking with the extra ink on a couple of my large blender brushes. I'm starting with some light blue for the wall. Then, when it turns out there wasn't quite enough ink, I'm grabbing out my speckled egg, which is also a really nice, pretty light blue ink, and adding that to the background for that wall. Next, we'll move on to the countertop. I'm removing the Post-it tape and repositioning it on that same line. This time, I'm using the other edge of the tape and masking over the wall section. For the countertop, I'm using the excess yellow on this other blender brush. I'm bringing in some of that color into the jar, but then I'm going back and masking off the cookies with a scrap of Post-it tape so that not too much ink mingles with them. To ground the cookie jar and cookies, I need some darker yellow. So I'm adding some squeezed lemonade to my brush and going in a little heavier under the bottom of those images. Now let's remove the mask. Now that looks so nice, but now my jar shaker looks too stark white. So I'm going to go in with a little of that speckled egg. To add a little texture, I'm using my distressed water bottle and adding a little bit of water droplets to the background, and then I'm going to dry up any of that excess with a paper towel. Then I decided I want to add a little shimmer to this too, so I'm going to use a couple of my DIY shimmer sprays. These are made with just some perfect pearls and water. Just shake it up real well so that the mica is not sitting on the bottom, and then you can use that either to spray or to do like I'm doing today and just add some splatter. Since I added some water and splatter to this, I do need to dry it before I can move forward. So I'm just using my Ranger Heat It tool, to dry up all of those little marks so I can go on to the next step. Next, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out a sentiment. Now, I have trouble getting everything lined up, so I'm glad I came across a tool that I haven't used in a while. This little sheet of acetate is one that I've had in my stash for a while, and I believe it's a free download on my Sweet Petunias website. If I can find it, I'll leave it in the description, but it helps you line everything up perfect in your stamp platform. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp down a sentiment here, and I'm going to do some heat embossing with that. So now I've got that stamped down with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going over that with some Wow Clear embossing powder. Then I'll use my Marby heat tool to heat that up. I trimmed this panel down and created a gold matting layer using a couple of dies from the Hero Arts Infinity rectangle die set. Now I'm going to just layer those up using my dot liner adhesive. Now comes the fun part. It's time for a bunch of shaker pieces. Now I've got some Christmas confetti that I've had in my stash for at least a year. I think this is probably some from Dollar Tree, just some, confetti, table spatter, that sort of thing. And I'm going to add some of that right in the center of the jar on my card panel before I put the shaker topper part on. I want to make sure that basically all of the pieces stay away from the adhesive if at all possible. Okay, now is the moment of truth. I'm putting that shaker topper over the top of my shaker bits, and it looks just adorable. Here are a few photos of the finished card. You can see a lot more photos over on my blog and on the DiesRUs website. I'll be leaving a link to each of those down below. Thank you so much for dropping in. You guys have a wonderful day, and if I can make it, you can too.